One day, Pringle went to the store to buy milk. After getting 2 bags, he saw an old lady open a bag of bread and put green ink in it. She walked to the cashier and went berserk, saying she purchased the bread and that it had mold on it. The cashier said, "Excuse me, but that's ink, not mold." Then the crazy old lady said she bought the bread and said if she doesn't die, then it's ink and not mold. She ripped open the bag and started eating the green bread. The old lady then played dead, sticking her tongue out. The store manager came out with security to escort her out, and once they told her to get up, she said, "Oh my lord! God, let me up from the dead!" Hellbent had a 5-year-old brother who always got attention. It got to the point where his mom hardly ever gave him any attention. She would always tell him that she was busy playing with his little brother whenever he needed to ask her a question. One day, they were outside playing on a slip and slide. Hellbent wanted to turn, but couldn't get his mom's attention. So he decided to do the only logical thing he could think of. He picked up a large chunk of broken concrete and threw it at his little brother. The concrete hit his brother on the head, splitting it open. He had to be rushed to the hospital where he got staples for the injury. Hellbent got into serious trouble, getting sent to bed without dinner only after getting his ass spanked.
Tolop's bratty little sister has a lot of annoying habits, but the worst one is the way she's always hiding his stuff. She loves going into his room and rearranging things, hiding his toys, controllers, art supplies, and even his phone in places he'll never look. One time, she took things too far. She hid her mom's car keys, stressing everyone in the house out and making them late for work and school. This had serious consequences because Tolop had a test that morning. To this day, Tolop suspects his little sister is actually the devil.
The funniest thing Zaraganba saw a stranger do was at a bar near the college he attended. Normally, that would be normal, but the man kept pointing at the air hockey table instead of the pool table. What was even funnier was that someone almost as drunk as he was took him up on it. They started using pool cues to shoot the air hockey pucks into each other's goals. Zaragamba nearly choked on his rum coke from laughing so much. Emoji was watching TV with his parents when a commercial for one of those things that files dead skin off your feet came on. During it, Emoji, for some reason, decided it'd be a good idea to say,
"Now that's what I call a pedophile."
Fortunately, his parents didn't get mad. However, he assured them he'd never make a joke like that again. He's still wondering why he even said that in the first place.
The dumbest lie Dolan tried to get away with was when he was in school. Back then, he had a bad stutter that stopped him from raising his hand during class. One day, a little kid asked him why he spoke so strangely. Dolan answered,
"Oh, my parents were kidnapped by aliens and they had their tongues ripped out, so it was hard for them to speak, of course. Then when I was born, my parents passed it on to me. So now it's hard for me to speak."
The little kid went around to his other little friends and told them Dolan's story. It went on for 2 or 3 years until he found out it was fake.
When she was in 7th grade, Ramona had a boyfriend who she had been dating for about a year. He wasn't that bright and she never really liked him that much. At brunch one day, Ramona told him that they needed to talk in private. She pulled him to the side of the building with a box of chocolates in her hand. In the box were chocolates wrapped with papers that came together to say, "I'm dumping you." But he read them wrong and thought they said, "I will dump on you." He went around telling the whole school that Ramona would take a dump on all of her boyfriends. By the end of the day, the entire school called her Dumpy. It got so bad that even the principal found out about the note and told her parents. She ended up getting grounded and was called Dumpy for the rest of her time at that school.
It happened 2 years ago to Hellbent and his dad, who were working in the backyard all day. When they were done, they decided to make a little fire pit. About 10 minutes into their little fire, Hellbent saw their neighbor peek over the fence to see what the smoke was about, then went back into her house. When that happened, Hellbent thought it was nothing. But 10 minutes later, when he went inside his house, he heard a loud knock at the door. It was the fire department. The neighbor called the fire department on them because they made a tiny fire pit. Hellbent and his dad were also forced to put it out, and this got his parents a bit salty. Today that neighbor has moved out, or will move out, because there is a for sale sign in front of their house. Hellbent doesn't think they like them after that.
Doopy used to work retail where she would just walk around helping customers. One time, a kid no older than 15 who was soaking wet for some reason ran up to her. She figured maybe he got caught in the rain or something. He demanded that she follow him. He ran into the men's bathroom with Doopy reluctantly following behind. When she walked in, he flung open the door to the handicap stall, and depicted on the wall was a picture of the earth with people holding hands around it, drawn in his own shit. He then dug around in his pocket, fished out a turd, and offered it to her. He asked, "Wanna play tic-tac-toe?" Doopy said, "Sure, hold on." She walked out of the bathroom and radioed the manager on duty, but by the time he got there, the kid was gone. He was almost caught brown-handed. Oh, had to put 2 puns in there about shit, huh?
When Shima was 6 years old, her and her sister had this really mean babysitter whenever their mom was out doing her job. She rarely fed them and always mixed up their belongings. She would even beat them, even though they did nothing wrong. One day, the babysitter started yelling at Shima for reasons she didn't even know. Being 6 years old at the time, she tried talking to her to calm her down. Then, out of nowhere, she bit her nose and gave her a horrible nosebleed. When her mom got home, Shima told her the whole story, but she didn't believe her. It wasn't until another incident involving her forcing her and her sisters to wear each other's pajamas, with her sister only being 2. Their mother was so livid at the woman that she never brought them back. When Shima got older, she heard a rumor that the woman in question had been sent away to prison, but it felt like it wasn't good enough.
When Sweet Commando was working at the counter at a bakery, a man came in and ordered a dozen donuts. After receiving his order, the man then asked if Sweet Commando was sure there were a dozen donuts in the box. Sweet Commando opened the box to recount. He got to 12 and the man asked, "Where's the last one?" The man said it was the law that they had to give him 13 donuts or a bakery's dozen. Sweet Commando had to explain several things. First, the man had ordered a dozen donuts, not a baker's dozen. And second, it's a baker's dozen, not a bakery's dozen. And most importantly, there's no law that says a bakery has to sell donuts in that number. The man took his order and said he was never coming back. He was back 3 days later. One time, Andy went to lunch with her brother to McDonald's. While they were there, she saw a guy pacing between the tables holding a stack of fry containers up to his ear as if he was on the phone. He walked around for about 2 minutes until he sat back down again, and as they were leaving he started doing it again, but instead of fry containers he had a stack of napkins. Andy doesn't know if it was a prank or if he was insane, but either way she thought it was pretty funny.
When Nixium was in middle school, he overheard his crush saying that she loved the taste of apples. So instead of suddenly buying her a nice apple from the cafeteria, he broke into the school kitchen and stole every apple he could find. He then broke into her locker and stuffed the entire thing full of apples. He watched her open the locker and the apples fell out, pelting her in the face as they exploded out of the locker. She was crying from being smacked in the head by more than 200 apples. Nixium hesitated for a moment and then blamed one of the other kids before running away. Unsurprisingly, he lost his chance with her that day.
Salty Squid believed that TVs had little actors living inside them. Whenever someone turned on a TV, a bell would ring that would call the actors to begin working. They would even take their time cards and punch in before working. For some reason, Salty Squid didn't believe the little actors participated in the commercials. Whenever a commercial came on, that was when the actors took their breaks. That was something Salty Squid convinced himself was real and believed for quite a long time.
The craziest bet Zargamba ever made was in 4th grade, when he and his friends were talking at lunch and one of his friends dared him to eat pizza. Through a straw! Zargamba's friend said he would give him $10 to do it. He figured it wouldn't be too bad since it was pizza, but it tasted as terrible as it felt. Basically, he got mostly pizza sauce, which he had to go to the trash can to spit out. The whole thing made him feel terrible after that. Worst of all, he never got his $10 because his friend's mother wouldn't allow it.
Emoji was at his friend's birthday party once, who was turning 12. Emoji had never met his friend's dad before and was excited to meet him, but he was running very late. His friend's dad finally arrived 30 minutes late to the party, but something seemed off. Soon, Emoji, along with everyone else, realized that he was really drunk. He started to sing happy birthday to a random kid, and Emoji's friend just watched in horror. He then pulled his pants down and walked into the next room. Emoji watched as he waltzed straight into the kitchen and started pissing in the sink. Emoji's friend stood there face-palming, pretending it wasn't happening.
When Melissa was in high school, a student who was pregnant had committed suicide by hanging herself in the middle of one of the classrooms. It was rumored that her ghost could be seen hanging there after dark. Well, she and her friend Gooby decided to sneak into school one night and investigate. They didn't notice anything unusual until they heard someone sobbing. They turned their torches and saw a girl in a school uniform with her arms reaching for them, screaming. They screamed back and they ran for their lives. And apparently, to this day, you can still hear her crying when the classroom is quiet.
Melissa was waiting in line at a store once when a woman was checking out in front of her. The store had a raffle in order to raise money for breast cancer research. When the cashier asked the woman if she wanted to buy a raffle ticket and donate to the cause, the woman said no. She then continued on to explain to the cashier that cancer is not real, it's just a fungus. She then said that if anyone who had cancer just ate an alkaline diet, the cancer would just go away. The cashier just stared at her for a moment before awkwardly saying, "Okay." Before leaving, the woman added one more thing by whispering, "The government just doesn't want us to know the truth." There was a girl James Shark liked when he was in the 8th grade. He wanted to tell her, but was too nervous. So he decided to send her an email, which she responded to by saying, "Oh, okay." Everything was fine until lunchtime when a guy walked up to James Shark and asked, while smirking, what his shoe size was. Instead of answering, James Shark walked up to the girl he liked and asked,
"Honestly, do you really care about my shoe size?"
Embarrassed, he walked away while hearing a loud laugh behind him, which came from the guy who asked him about his shoe size. Later, the girl told James Shark that the guy was a dick who tells lies.
When Nixium was in preschool, he was super shy. He only had a few friends and his teacher was his best friend. One day, Nixium's teacher said it was National Compliment Day, where each person had to say something nice to someone. So Nixium stood up in front of several teachers, pointed to his teacher and said,
"You have a nice butt."
The teacher smiled awkwardly and a few other kids laughed. He then realized what he said and sat back down very quickly.
Spincess and her mom were grocery shopping one day, and while looking for the lettuce, Spincess saw one of her friends from high school. They talked for a bit before Spincess's mom left them alone to grab some cereal. There was an awkward silence after she left. Eventually, the man said, "You and your mom are giving me a huge boner." Spincess looked up from her phone in disgust as the man just stared at her as if he did nothing wrong. Spincess called store security, which turned out to be a good thing. Apparently, the guy was a wanted rapist.
Spinal Palm has a pen that is partially transparent at the point where people usually hold it, and it was also very easy to open. So he just rolled some paper with notes inside around the ink holder and just took a look whenever he wanted. He's also failed a few tests which his friends passed. So Spinal Palm asked them for their tests and redid it with his friend's tests under his. For easy cheating, he got a B, because the grade dropped from an A because he failed the first time. Spinal Palm and his friend have also swapped their tests during another one. Their chemistry teacher was the most oblivious teacher, so they easily did it. If his friend didn't know something, or when Spinal Palm didn't, they'd simply switch their tests. Once Spinal Palm did both their tests, and they both got an A-. And Spinal Palm's friend even got 1 point more.
One time when Snoopy was 11, her mum drove her and her sister to her sister's new college campus. The normal road was closed, so they had to take a detour through a homeless community. There were hundreds of homeless people around. As they drove through, Snoopy tried not to make eye contact with anyone at all. The homeless had surrounded their car like zombies, so they had to drive really slow. It still brings a shiver to Snoopy's spine when she thinks about it.
When Dolan was 12, he had just seen a movie with his friend who got a ride home. But Dolan only lived about a mile away, so he decided to walk. On the way out of the parking area, he noticed a red truck next to him with the window rolled down. A middle-aged redneck looked down at him, studied him for a moment, and then he drove away. Dolan started to jog until he got to the part of the road where the sidewalk ended. It was only about 2 more miles, so he just decided to jog in the grass. About half a mile later, the red truck came up beside him, and the redneck looked at him, smiled, and said, "You shouldn't be out here, boy. Stuff happens." Then he threw his car door open and jumped at Dolan. Dolan screamed and jumped out of the way just in time, and then sprinted towards his house for the rest of the mile. The man was behind him, honking the horn and calling out, "Boy!" Dolan got home, locked all the doors, and called the police, but they found no evidence of the man. Now Dolan always walks with a weapon in his pocket, such as a pencil or a small, hard-covered book.
One time, when Dolan was walking down the sidewalk, he started to whistle a song. Just then, a police officer drove up to him and screamed, "Why did you kill Spike?" Dolan had no idea what he was talking about, so he replied, "Who?" The police officer said, "Spike the dinosaur, damn it!" Before he knew it, Dolan was in handcuffs and was being carried off to the police station. When they entered the station, the police officer sobbed hysterically. One of his friends, a policewoman, asked him what was wrong. The police officer grabbed the chain on Dolan's handcuff and violently pulled it, shaking him around. He said, "He killed Spike!" The policewoman took the handcuffs off Dolan and said, "I'm so sorry for the inconvenience." Dolan found out later that the police officer had been drunk.
A while ago, back when she was still in school, Doopy was taking the train home when a man of notice came on the train. He was in a dress, wearing a headband with a little pink bow on top, and he was holding a plastic baby doll in his arms. A couple ended up talking to him, asking him what the heck was he doing. He answered that his wife had left him and that he was taking care of his kid. Throughout the trip at random times, he would bust out laughing, and he would occasionally feed his baby with a bottle.
When he was little and got angry, Dolan wouldn't cry, scream, or shout. Instead, he would break something. One time he got his dessert taken away from him. He ended up doing what he usually did when he was angry, but this time, he grabbed a little marble figurine. He smashed it on the ground, but what he didn't know was that the piece of art was valued at about $4,000. As punishment, Dolan's dad put a bowl in the freezer and then put it over his face. Dolan had to sit with the freezing bowl on his face for about an hour and a half. The bowl was painfully cold, but afterward, he learned his lesson.
Doopy's next door neighbours tend to bicker all the time, and she usually hears them. She doesn't even like them, but her family's friends with them. After exams week, Doopy was ready to sleep because she was studying the whole week before. Around 2 a.m, she was woken up by her neighbours yelling. Doopy's window was open, so she heard them arguing about the lights being on. Yes, they were fighting about someone turning the lights on. Doopy yelled at them from her window,
Shut the fuck up or else I'll call the cops!
She closed her window, but she still couldn't sleep.
When he was 14, Dolan and his family went on a trip across the United States, and one of their stops was in Oregon. They decided to camp for the night when his mother asked him and his brother Zaraganba to get some wood for a fire. They did, but all in a slightly uncomfortable silence. Dolan felt like striking up a conversation, but had trouble deciding on what to talk about. He suddenly asked,
"So, do you plan on having sex with your girlfriend when we get home?"
Zaraganba immediately stopped collecting wood and said,
We're not talking about this, and if you ever do again, I'll punch you in the jaw.
He then resumed picking up wood. For the rest of the night, Dolan and Zaraganba sat in an even more uncomfortable silence. They didn't speak to each other until the next day.
When Ghost Toast was about 11, he went over to a girl's house to play Super Mario Sunshine. When he walked in, he saw 3 Playboy magazines, a can of Cheese Whiz, and a controller. He also heard what sounded like somebody moaning in pain. Ghost Toast didn't investigate or ask any questions. He just grabbed his copy of Pokemon Sapphire and bolted to the door. He hasn't talked to that girl at all since that day. When Ghost Toast was little, he was on a field trip with his class to see the Dead Sea Scroll exhibit at the museum. Everyone was excited, but he was very tired that day, and he wanted to find an area to rest. Right in front of one of the exhibit's display cages was a sign that he thought was bolted to the ground. Ghost Toast went to lean on it thinking it would be the perfect place to shut his eyes for a few minutes. However, The second he leaned on it, the sign tipped over and knocked into a display case, which knocked down another case, and one by one, they fell like dominoes. Nobody knew that Ghost Host was the cause of the chaos, as he immediately hid in the bathroom for the rest of the trip.
When Pandora's friend was staying over one night, they decided to prank call a friend. He was really strange and funny, so they thought they would have a good laugh. So when they called him, he found them out almost immediately. They began to have a normal conversation, but a few minutes in he said,
"I bet I could guess everything about your room."
He guessed that her room was painted blue and brown. She had horse posters all over the walls, and the curtains were beige and white striped. It was all true. He then proceeded to name other small details. The phone was still in the middle of her bunk bed, that Pandora was wearing a large pajama shirt, her friend was sitting crisscross, and they were eating chips. All true again. They asked him how he knew, and all he said was,
"I can see you from behind a tree in your front yard."
Then he hung.
Seema's weirdest secret is kind of a sensitive topic for her. She has this fantasy of being swallowed whole by someone the same size as her, especially someone she likes. Naturally, her friends and her family have no idea. She stresses that this is not a dangerous fantasy. Seema sees it more as a way to get close to someone, like a form of intimacy, with a lot more spit and stomach acid. She claims that all she wants is to be inside them. Yeah. After some research, Seema discovered this fantasy is called Vor, so although it might be a little unusual, she's definitely not alone.
I don't really have any interesting breakup stories, however, I have had one awkward rejection kind of story. So back before YouTube, I was doing a writing course, and there was this girl that I could never talk to, as to, oh god, I don't want to make a fool out of myself. So after months and months, I eventually worked up the courage to ask her out to the movies, and she said yes, and that was great. And then I went home, and then I got a message from her that said, "It might not work because my best friend likes you and has been dropping hints that you haven't gotten." And at that stage I was like, oh shit, oh fuck, because then immediately I was like, no, the hints, I didn't know, I was too busy focusing on this girl, I didn't realize her friend was talking to me a lot, oh no. So immediately I was like, I messed up. I did end up dating her friend, but it didn't last very long, unfortunately. It's just one of those times, it's like, rats, like, the hints. You just don't get the hints that are really obvious, it just sucks. What was my weirdest encounter with a homeless person? Well, there was this one time, quite a few years ago, I was on the tram and there was this girl in front of me and there was this weird, creepy homeless guy dressed in pretty much rags. He came over to her and he's just like, "Hey, you want to have some sex?" And she's just like, oh my god. Like she's like pretending, he doesn't exist, like, oh no. And I'm here like, oh god, please don't do this. And unfortunately for all of us, he took down his pants and started like squeezing it. Pretty much everyone in the carriage just noped right out at the very next stop, like, nope, not dealing with this, not even gonna think about this ever again. Felt really bad for that girl, and I felt even worse for myself. That was a pretty crap experience. 0 out of 10, absolutely. When Gooby was little, she didn't understand why her parents complained about not having enough money. As far as she could tell, every time they needed some, they just went to a big machine and it spit money out. Later on, she realized that ATMs really don't work that way.
Pandora worked at a hotel for a few years as the front desk agent. When this lady who looked to be in her early 30s came into the lobby, she apologized for the loud argument her and her mother had the night before. Despite not working the night before, Pandora accepted the apology, to which the woman responded by recounting the whole argument in excessive detail, rambling on for 45 minutes. Eventually, her dinner came, and the lady said she'd grab a cup of tea so Pandora could eat, as employees aren't supposed to eat at the front desk. She brought her food to the staff room, then came out to check to see if the lobby was empty, only to find the same lady on the guest computer. So Pandora had to stand there and wait patiently for this woman to leave. After attempting to turn off cookies on her browser, she told Pandora a long-winded story about how she was a victim of identity fraud, only stopping to order a pizza. 30 minutes later, the pizza came. She took it out of the box, then placed it on the floor and used the guest computer for another hour. She finally left with her cold pizza and tea in hand. Pandora went to the staff room to eat her burger and fries, only to find out that they were both cold. Starving, she ate them anyway, only to get food poisoning the next day.